Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sanity Podcast with Allison Camerata and Dave Briggs. We wanted to jump on really quickly tonight because of what just happened at the White House with President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump and Vice President Vance. And we're joined by Ian Bremmer. Ian, thank you so much for joining us because this was just such a shock wave that was sent throughout. I mean, the world, really, it sounds like,
Yeah.
with all of
Yeah.
the commentators saying they've never seen anything like it. What was your take?
Probably the worst day for the world since 9/11. This is a cataclysmic shift in the Western order, in the transatlantic order. This is a core break. The United States has been both in bipartisan support for Ukraine and coordinated support with NATO for Ukraine for 3 years since the Russians invaded in 2022. And this break has led Trump to really decisively tell the Ukrainians, the Europeans, as well as his own party and the Democrats, I'm sorry, we're actually going to work with the Russians, and Ukraine, we're going to cut a deal over your heads. That is an extraordinary thing for the United States to say. And of course, America's allies in Europe, with the exception of Viktor Orban, are overwhelmingly coming out publicly and saying, no, they're not with Trump. They're going to stick with Ukrainians. Of course, nice to say that. What they're capable of doing is a very different question. And clearly, this is Zelensky in a lot of trouble. But more importantly, it raises big questions about whether or not the Western alliance is fit for purpose at this point.
This is being celebrated by the Kremlin at the moment on X. But Ian, it probably doesn't surprise you to hear this is being celebrated by Trump supporters. I posted it on social media and the reaction was split. Trump supporters were celebrating this because they see a strong man defending the United States, and they see Vladimir Zelensky having overplayed his hand and not been deferential enough to the United States. Your reaction?
The United States has a lot of support for ending wars. The United States spent trillions of dollars in a failed war in Afghanistan, trillions of dollars in a failed war in Iraq, and Trump has opposed this war in Ukraine and has wanted to end it. And Americans are not fighting and dying in this war, but they are spending a lot of money. And the desire of Americans very far away from the front lines, not Europeans, saying this isn't our war, why are we doing it, is very strong. I'm not surprised there are a lot of supporters. I do think it's important for us to remember that when the Americans were the only country that ever actually invoked Article 5 in the Collective Security Alliance of NATO after 9/11, and asked America's allies to join us and fight with us in a war that was not theirs, they said yes. And they fought with the Americans for 20 years. And we ended the war. And we ended the war without asking our allies how they felt about that. And so, I mean, you can understand that American allies across Europe right now, and Canada, are looking at the United States and saying, we do not feel like we have a trusted ally in the United States. We do not feel like we have a collective security agreement that we can count on. I felt that way when I was in Munich at the security conference watching Vice President Vance just a couple weeks ago. I certainly felt that way watching Trump, Vance, and Zelensky in the White House earlier today.
Ian, as you know, President Trump has always been very partial to Vladimir Putin. He also said that he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. He likes Viktor Orban, or publicly has lauded the way he's led with an iron fist. Is there any, in his fantastical, I mean, maybe this is a fantastical question, is there any benefit for the U.S. for rearranging this and becoming allied with those countries instead of our allies?
It's not clear to me that Trump, in his first term, was so set on a Russia relationship. I mean, Trump's the guy. His administration provided the Javelin anti-tank missiles to the Ukrainians. Obama refused to do that. He thought it was too risky. He was the guy that put additional sanctions on a lot of Russian oligarchs that were close to Putin, like Oleg Deripaska. Obama didn't do it, thought it was too risky. Now, you can say that wasn't Trump. That was members of his cabinet. True, but he's president. He allowed it to happen. And so I think what's happening this time around is not so much that Trump is in Putin's pocket, but rather he feels like he's being played by the Europeans. He's being played by the Ukrainians, that the Americans have spent all this money for what? For a war he doesn't care about. And therefore, by cutting a deal with the Russians over the heads of American allies, he can stop spending the money. And he campaigned on that in part, and he is going to make good on that campaign promise. Now, what did the Americans get out of ending a war in Ukraine? Well, they stopped paying for the war in Ukraine. I do think that if you are China in this environment, you have a very strong reason to question if Trump is interested in supporting allies even farther away from the United States than Ukraine and then the Europeans. I mean,
Taiwan.
I'm talking about Taiwan. I'm talking about Japan and South Korea. I'm talking about American allies on the other side of the 9-dash line in the South China Sea. Certainly, if you're China, you want to test those things because it's completely unclear that a Trump administration would do very much to support those allies. Again, America is not doing very much to support the European allies at all. And that's on the back of Trump feeling that a strong Europe isn't good for the U.S. The biggest difference between Trump and Biden in foreign policy, it's not the Middle East, certainly not Israel, and it's not China, where they're both pretty hawkish. It's Europe. Biden believes a strong Europe is good for the United States, a collectively strong Europe that is aligned with American values on a globally fragmented stage. Trump believes that a strong Europe is bad for the United States. They have more bargaining power together.